Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Professor Dom here. It's Friday. It's a little slow. It's lunchtime, so I thought I'd get a quick video out to you. Maybe not so quick, but I want to review. First of all, I want to thank you for your discussion threads. I found the topics or the responses to your to the topics that were discussed to be kind of thought provoking, and we'll go through some of them. But just as a matter of administration, okay, and for your grades, you'll see some of you did not receive maximum points, and that's primarily because I asked you a question in the thread and you never got back to me. Um, One of you did, and I extended the thread through, I think, yesterday for your posting, but you could have just given me a call on the phone, sent me an email, but ignoring me is not the right way to entice me to get you a good grade. So I'd suggest you just not post and roast. I would suggest that you post what you want to post and check. I know you're all busy. I know you've got a lot to do, but so does Professor Dom. And if I can balance teaching for two universities, have a full-time job, tutor, and still do my parenting and grandparenting responsibilities, I think you could do what you got to do as well. Okay, and if you can't, then life's out of balance. So I don't want to hear any whining at the end of the term about grades. So if you have any questions, I want you to call me. But I'm not going to accept um, inadequate threads or discussions. You need to really contribute. And if you wait until the end, you also run the risk of not getting maximum points because you're not adding to the discussion. Um, Now, if I see you adding in the discussion and then post later, that's a different story. But the grading, it's not that I'm a tough grader, but some of you will walk away with C's in this class. I'm sorry to say that. I shouldn't have to say that, but some of you will. Um, so in any event, I want to get that out of the way, okay? Again, any questions on grading, please contact me beforehand, okay? We'll talk about how the papers and the exam will be graded, but I try to be as liberal as I can with the grading, but when I see either a student just not getting it or taking advantage, I'll clamp in like a vice, okay? Discussion thread 2. A lot of great topics you folks brought up. The one first item I want to bring up is this area of gray areas. Some of you were talking about ethical frameworks can lead you to different conclusions. So really there's no right or wrong answer. Well, that's a cop-out. There is a right or wrong, in the sense one is probably more right than another. It's hard to envision where there's clearly um, an equilibrium between the two. There could very well be, okay? But most of the times, if you think about it and reflect on it, you can tilt that needle. And Tamia did an outstanding job. Look at her post and what she wrote. Basically, she did identify the one critical variable that most people miss. And they don't miss it unintentionally. I think most people purposely avoid that variable, okay? And you'll understand why when you take a look at what Tamia wrote. Another really good point was this question of morality and ethics. Are they the same? One of you asked that question. And really, we use them synonymously, but technically they're not. Morality is kind of like our attributes, our characteristics, the way we behave. So are you a moral person? For example, back in my day, it was always moral, it was always right if there was a lady to open the door for her, to allow her to proceed through the threshold before you would go. That would have been considered moral behavior. Other moral behavior would be, if you were smoking a cigarette or a cigar or tobacco pipe you would never spit in public, right? Being a gentleman or a gentle lady, if you will, that's kind of what we're thinking about when we talk about morals, okay? Um, Morals are meant to make sure your lower brain doesn't function out of control, okay? Your lower brain wants, for example, just to eat all day long, dessert, apple pie, and ice cream. Um, your lower brain wants to probably react viscerally if someone were to say something mean to you, like you lost points on your discussion thread, right? And want you to take that person and maybe wring their neck. Morals elevate us from that lower brain, that instinctual fight or flight, to a more intellectual, if you will, more moral way of acting. And that's what morals are intended to do. Kind of rules of the road to make sure that you don't swerve off the road and hit a guardrail or do worse, okay? Ethics, on the other hand, what is ethical? When you look at the word ethics, ethics in itself is a study of different morals. Different societies have different morals, have different rules of behavior. For example, I can sit cross-legged like this here in a meeting with you, but if I were in Saudi Arabia or in the Islam world, this would be extremely insulting. Why? I am showing the sole of my shoe. Extremely insulting. Obvious reasons, right? Okay. So that's just one example of why we study ethics, because different people, different cultures have different morals. So I hope that kind of helps dispel some of that mysticism or confusion, okay? Another thing that came up was, and I'm just pushing you here, okay? I want some of you to feel uncomfortable with what I say, at least a little uncomfortable. That's how you're going to grow. One of you talked about auditing the middle class. In light of the fact that maybe millionaires and corporations are not being audited as much. Well, there's a rebuttal to that, isn't it? Number one, there are more people in the middle class, so more of them should be audited. There are much fewer millionaires and billionaires and corporations than there are the rest of us. But the one thing I want to note is in your post, and you know who you are, right? You didn't mention the poor people. Why shouldn't the poor be audited? Hey, Professor Dom, you're tripping on us, man. No, I'm not tripping on you, because I know the deal. I grew up in the inner city, okay? I grew up around people in my family who scammed the system, okay? I worked as a senior official at HUD doing tenant income match verification programs. And I can tell you, we found thousands of people in subsidized housing that you're paying for that were driving Mercedes, okay, that had jobs 20 some odd years ago in excess of $65,000, $70,000 a year. But yet, on their application, when they went in, they claimed that they were making $13,000 a year, they were unemployed, and they were getting away with immense amount of fraud. Also, IRS has reported the earned income credit, again, is being abused to the point where we know people are taking that credit and not qualifying for it. So why aren't they being audited? I mean, if we're all part of the same ship and that ship is sinking, can't we all help bail it out to the extent we can, try to keep that ship afloat? So to you, poster, I challenge you to rethink what ethical is in that context, okay? Another individual discussed we're not being tough enough on crime. Okay? And we have these smash and grab gangs. We've got problems with drugs all throughout our country, whether it's in rural parts of the country or inner cities. And we need to get tough on crime. We've got a lot of these craziness just going on in the cities. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting tough on crime, but I asked this poster, what about white collar crime? Okay? I mean, we're indicting, or we have indicted, a former sitting president, right? At least more than one. But you know who I'm talking about. But now you got a president and his son, and there's a whole lot of smoke, a whole lot of fire, and it looks like there's some really clear-cut evidence of some bad stuff happening. I'll just stop there and say that. Well, if we let white-collar crime go unpunished or get great plea deals, why are we going after the young kid in the street who might not know any better, has no money, trying to make money for maybe his family just to live, and we throw them in prison for 20 years? So I challenge that for all of us to think about, okay? If we're going to go after crime, let's go after, in my opinion, the top first. Clean up the house, the White House, down to Congress, corporations, down to the unions. We'll see the streets get better, okay? But anyway, just my opinion there. Healthcare, another great post on healthcare. You know, hey, governments, state governments need to do more to help people by giving more Medicaid to help them. Otherwise, they're killing them, or they're helping them die, basically. I'm paraphrasing, so please forgive me, poster, if I've mischaracterized your post. I'm going from memory here. Yeah, there's an obligation society has, I guess. You know, I mean, and I say I guess because we have no constitutional right to health care from the government. Italy, I'm Italian American, they have socialized medicine because it's baked into their constitution. That's a constitutional right the Italians have. But let me tell you something, they don't like using it because it sucks, okay? You got government workers who are underpaid, okay? Including the doctors. They're working 8-hour days. Sometimes now during COVID they were working crazy shifts, I get it. But quality of health care isn't what you would think it should be. But I digress a bit. So the question about health care is it the state or your responsibility if I don't take care of my health and I eat poorly, okay? I don't exercise, I might drink, I might do drugs, and then I find myself in need of long-term care when I'm an old man. Is it fair to you that you pick up the full tab? You know, what's the ethics there? You know, everyone wants to talk about rights. I have a constitutional right to free speech. Yes, you do. But that also means for every right, there is a corollary obligation or responsibility. So while you have a right to free speech, when I speak, you have a duty, a responsibility to keep your mouth shut and let me speak so we can at least have a dialogue. Today it's not like that. Today people have lost a sense of obligation and duty. In federal service, or in public service I should say, always remember your rights are accompanied by obligations, and so is the public's. They have a right, but they also have a responsibility to take care of themselves. Constitution requires general welfare. That's that clause, right? The government will provide for the general welfare, not the specific welfare of the nation. Okay, it's still an individual and their responsibility. So think about that. One of you brought up the issue of culture wars. You brought up the issue of abortion, LGBTQ rights, etc., etc. And these are all valid discussions. They need to be held. But until we can put the emotion aside, the vitriol aside, the hatred aside, we're not going to make progress. This is why this course is hopefully going to help you how to think critically and to evaluate evidence, not as a liberal, not as a progressive, not as a Republican, not as a Democrat, not as a Caucasian or as a black person, not as an Asian or a Hispanic, but as a human being with a wonderful brain that has a lower brain to it, if you will, and an upper brain. And both have to work together. And in so doing, we use logic and evidence, and we weigh it, and we try to develop the right solution. Ethics is trying to teach us in developing that solution that it should be a moral solution. And that's the question. What is moral, right? So think about this in terms of, or in the terms of what you believe in these culture wars, okay? As I said in my prior class, there was one student who was a social justice warrior, and I pushed a bit and I said, are you really a social justice warrior? Or are you possibly a racist hiding behind that shield? And that student was kind of taken aback. I'm like, no, think about it. Think about it hard. Are you fighting for everyone's justice or just a particular group? Why do we only think about people who think like us, look like us? Why don't we care about them? Why is it that only the blonde and blue-eyed people matter? Tough question. Ask yourself why. Why do I favor one group over another? Will I treat the other group differently? Or will I see in them what I would say to you, the God-given value and dignity they deserve, no matter what lifestyle they live, no matter who they believe in or if they don't believe in, no matter what they look like? They're part of that human family. Okay? Don't put labels on people, especially now with these culture wars. It's a horrible thing. Discussion, the last point in this discussion thread, one of you brought up an issue about karma. Karma is an interesting concept. I study a little Buddhism, very little. I'd recommend this book. It's free. It's from the Falun Gong, which is they're a Chinese Buddhist sect. And this was written by Hongzhi Li. You can get it for free if you go online and Google that name. I'm not going to try to pronounce it entirely for you, but you see what it is. It explains an ethical framework, if you will, from a Buddhist point of view and how they view the world and what's happening today. You'll be shocked at the similarities that the Buddhists see that the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians have also noted. There's a thread, quite interesting. If you were also inclined, I think this book is a bit out of print. Some of you may be wondering, this notion of God, before God even became God, like in a religion, where was he or she, if you believe it was a she? Where was God when pagan religions began? By Lester Sumrall. Very interesting book. It kind of gives you a tour through the major religions. And it's written with a Christian bent, but nonetheless it provides very good information. Okay? So anyway, discussion 2 was really good. Like all I've said here is just to get you to think, make you feel a little uncomfortable maybe, pause a bit, grow a bit, critically think a lot. Okay? Um, Last thing I want to cover is discussion 3, kind of prep you for the next week's discussion. We're going to be talking about the divine command theory, civil religion, and how they differ. Okay? Quite simply, under the divine command theory, many people would say, as there was an old, I shouldn't say old comedian, he's passed away, but Flip Wilson. Flip Wilson was wonderful. If you ever get a chance on YouTube, do some Flip Wilson. He has a skit with Richard Pryor. Actually, there are a couple skits with Richard Pryor, and if you can get Richard Pryor busting out, he's good. Flip was really good. But he would play a part of a woman who was doing all kinds of crazy things and say, the devil made me do it. The devil made me do it. It's kind of the divine command theory. God told me to, as Boss says, take 2 airplanes and fly them into the World Trade Center and take another one and try to hit the Capitol but get the Pentagon instead. Yeah, God told me to do it. That's why I did it. That's an extreme. Okay? I'm not poking fun of Christians or Jews or Muslims or any religious group. I'm just trying to say, taken to an extreme, the divine command theory, can be a very bad thing. But there's some relevance to it nonetheless. Okay? Think about that when you do the reading. Civil religion, it's kind of like taking the divine command theory and putting it on steroids and saying, hey, this applies to the whole nation. Well, this has developed over history, right? We see it, and it's just not with Christianity. It began with paganism. It evolved into Judaism. The first monotheistic religion was Judaism. From there, Christianity grew. In the East, Buddhism took off, okay? And kind of formed the cultural morals, right? The behaviors that people were to follow, the ethics that they were going to follow. And they tend to follow natural law. Today, maybe the past 40 years, people have wanted to deviate from natural law. Clear example of natural law is in nature, typically, birds mate with birds and bees mate with bees. You don't see birds and bees mating. Okay? Natural law. Those who would go against natural law would say, look, no, bees can mate with birds. You just got to figure out a way of doing it. Okay, lots of luck. Study that one. So, civil religion follows natural law. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. The Greeks taught us about natural law. They built a lot of their logic, a lot of their philosophy over natural law, what they observed in nature, what they saw. Okay? The problem becomes when the civil religion divorces itself from natural law. And that happens. It gets hijacked. Okay? Some people said that after the 9/11 attacks, the terrorists were extremist Muslims who were hijacking their religion. That's an example. Okay? Abuses in Christianity. Again, being untethered to those really sound principles. That's a danger. Okay? Seems that societies work best when they're really tethered to their morals and they basically reward good behavior and punish bad behavior. As they see it, there's a sense of order. Okay? People might not have liked Saddam Hussein in Iraq. We didn't, supposedly, although we funded him. He kept order. Many tyrants keep order. they understand their society. They, reward good behavior, bad behavior. If you were at one time caught in a Middle Eastern country stealing, you might find yourself without a hand. So, again, civil religion, okay? The real interesting discussion, I think, though, in discussion thread 3 is conscience and moral development. How did we become who we are? Okay? They tell us these things happen well before we are like 5 years old. A child develops their personality before 5. So young parents out there, love and hug those children now. That bond's got to exist now. Okay? Also, scientists have told us that the frontal lobe, you could really see mine pretty well. I ain't got no hair, man. Any injury, you find that people lack compassion, empathy, a feeling of pain, or a sense of connection with a frontal lobe injury. This brain concussion that we see mostly in pro football players, soccer players, is a prime example of it. So, unfortunately, some parents who believe in carnal punishment don't spank the right end of the baby, and you hit somebody upside the head, you're doing something really bad, especially if they're small. Children need love. They need tenderness. They need firmness. They need correction. They need love and tenderness, and they need to know right from wrong. But you just don't do it by hitting them upside the head. We know this, but yet we still do it, unfortunately. Kohlberg stages of moral development. Take a look at those. I'm interested in what the women think. Supposedly, his study was only based on men. It seems to make sense, but I'm a guy, I'm a man. But women might look at Kohlberg and say, that's not how we ladies develop our moral development. Okay, maybe you can elucidate me and the others in class if you think Kohlberg's study was male biased or biased because he only used men. The other thing, last thing, is you're going to overlook this in the reading. I know you are, because many of you probably don't even do the readings. I hope that you do, though. There's a Martin Luther King quote, "The strength to love." It's a very brief quote. Read it. Because many of us, I point my finger at me too, many of us, each day, when we wake up and when we go to bed, we should kind of quickly ask ourselves this question: did my actions today reconcile with my moral behavior? Example I give, and then I'm going to end the video. Had in another class, a woman said, "I'm a Christian woman. I'm a religious woman. I go to church." Okay, but yet during the term, she brought out some things, and she said, I understand that although I might be a Christian woman, I've made some mistakes recently because of pride, hurt, whatever it was. So every morning and every night, ask yourself, can I reconcile my behavior with my moral values? Okay? If I say I'm a Christian, oh yes, I'm a devout Christian, oh yes, holy, holy, holy Lord. But yet, I'm out there drinking, I'm out there doing all kinds of stuff, maybe even running a country. Maybe I'm a, who is she, that woman? A congressman. Maybe I'm going to a movie with a boyfriend and allowing, and doing some right out there in public. But I'm a Christian woman. Oh, really? Yeah, it's okay. You could fail. We all do. Just admit it, move on, and do better. Any questions? Let me know. Thank you. We'll see you next week.